Kublai was the 5th Khagan of the Mongol Empire, reigning from 1260 to 1294. This is the Kublai P1. Here are the two main things that you get out of the box that we care about: the P1 blaster and the magazine. This particular setup, out of the box, comes with a metal slide, a metal outer barrel with a 14mm counterclockwise thread. So you can put a tracer unit on there or a suppressor if you're into that kind of thing. And it also has a metal inner barrel, and that's a 7.1mm inner diameter metal barrel, which is really cool. It also comes with this magazine. Now, this magazine is actually an updated design to some of the ones, or some of the P1s that you might see floating around out there or videos. They've strengthened the spring so it pushes gels up faster. They've also allowed it to double stack gels, and it's also got some work done to the feeder, which basically means or helps it prevent from misfeeds, breaking gels, that sort of stuff as well. The internals of the magazine itself have all been reinforced so that the seals don't rot out or anything like that. But this is a really good magazine. Now, I've managed to get up to 18 gels in here, and we'll go through that in a bit more detail. The normal P1 that you can get, or one of the standard models, is nylon. So the red slide ones that you've seen has a nylon slide. It has a plastic outer barrel with no thread, and the inner barrel is plastic as well. And that's the same for the tan Glock, or tan P1. So not the one with the gold slide, but the one that's all tan all over, that's nylon as well. So, the straight difference there is that this is going to come with all of the bits and pieces that you kind of want. The metal is going to last longer. It gives it a bit more durability. It feels a lot nicer. It's really fun to shoot as well. Being the kind of first gel or gas blowback gel blaster, there's kind of a lot of stuff to cover. So in this video, we're just going to do a bit of an overview of the product and address probably some of the concerns people have around the P1. And separately, we'll have a kind of a gas blowbacks 101 maintenance, all that sort of stuff as well. All right, so that gets you the content a little bit separate and hopefully keep this video nice and short. Let's talk about gas. Now, there's been a lot of debate around the gas that we can or can't use with these gas blowbacks, and what's legal in Australia, that sort of stuff. Now, firstly, the P1, the product, has actually been classified as a toy. It's been tested by Queensland Police. It's all good to go, at least in Queensland as far as I'm aware. In terms of the gas, the product is originally designed to use a gas known as R134A, or named R134A. It's actually a refrigerant. Now, the issue with that is, firstly, you need a license to actually handle that gas, and secondly, it is actually you get fined for venting that gas into the atmosphere due to its effect on the environment. Now, you can do your own research on that. If you don't believe me or you want to do your own thing, that's fine. But for the purpose of this review and everything I've looked at with the product, I've been using this 3-in-1 air duster gas. You can get it from Bunnings. There are other brands. You can get them from Officeworks, Kmart, that sort of stuff as well. But this here is actually using Difluoroethane, which is flammable due to it's a compressed gas. But it's there's no issues with venting this into the atmosphere, that sort of stuff. You'd normally use this for cleaning out your electronics and that sort of stuff as well. The main thing is that you will need to get a little adapter. So a lot of people that do have their hands on the P1 have used butane adapters. This little piece here comes from a can of butane. They've got a bunch of adapters on top. That one in particular is from Samba gas from Bunnings. They're all right, they're okay. You get a bit of leakage, and but that's that. You can also get them from J-Car, that sort of thing. If you really want to have a good time, there are some adapters that are designed for another sport that has gas blowbacks, and they work really well. So I've got some of those on the way. I'll provide a link to them. So if you can get serious about your gas blowbacks, you probably want to get one of those. You, in theory, can run propane if you run the right upgrades and that sort of stuff as well. Again, you'll need an adapter. And keep in mind that, according to the manufacturer's specs, you don't want to be running propane because it might, run things down. So you'll need to upgrade your blaster, that sort of stuff. But you will absolutely, if there is any warranty, it will be voided as soon as you start using propane. So let's quickly go through the kind of mechanics of a gas blowback gel blaster. It is the first one on the market. I won't go into heaps of detail. We'll have a separate video on how these things work. But given it is the first gas blowback gel blaster on the market, it's a good idea just to have an idea of what's different and what to expect. So firstly, you've got your two main components. It's a little bit different to your electric blasters. The entire function of the blaster is mechanical. So with the magazine not only holds your gels, so you'll see on the front here, All right, gels are stacked in the front and held there by a spring. It's also a gas cylinder. So there's a depression nozzle there. Ideally, don't press that. There's a fill nozzle at the bottom. So all you kind of do when you're gassing these things up, you've got your gas can, hopefully you've got the right nozzle. You chuck the nozzle on, make sure the can is inverted and push that down. Now, if you're using these little butane nozzles, you might get a bit of leakage. So you'll waste a bit of gas, sure. But just bear in mind that the gas that comes out in the liquids and that, they're very cold. Ideally, you don't want to get it in your eyes or on your skin. So if you want, or if you're unsure, wear eye protection, wear some gloves, and that should kind of keep you going. You'll see with the gels, so there's a spring pushing these gels up. So to load it, you kind of just pull this spring. Hopefully I don't lose too many gels here. You pull the spring back, you load gels in here. You can kind of use these cool speed loaders, which I believe come with the revolver gel blasters. I'm sure retailers will start selling those separately as well. So you load those in, you release the spring. You'll see immediately there's actually a gel here ready to go, ready to fire. The magazine is then loaded into the gel blaster. As the slide comes forward, actually, get that for you. So inside this slide, there is kind of the equivalent of your air cylinder or your nozzle sitting in here. So essentially what happens is as the slide racks back and forth, this little nozzle is moving around and there's a little extractor sitting there. That extractor comes forward and it'll bump this gel. Let's see if I can kind of demonstrate to you here. So as that extractor hits, it's actually going to eject the gel and it'll put it into the chamber ready to go. So let's just put this back together. All right. So as the magazine goes in, all right, again, in here, you've got a gel ready to go. As the slide comes forward, there'll now be a round ready to fire. Simple pull of that trigger is going to fire the gel. There we go, just for safety. All right, that's how quickly it goes. That's how instantaneous the response is. So that is an extremely cool mechanism to finally have available, in gel ball. Now, despite what many people have said, you do not need to do any upgrades. You don't need to change anything in this blaster in order for it to run effectively. Okay, so yes, this one here has a metal slide and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't change the performance. There's nothing different about that. It's just a lot more satisfying. It's a lot more fun to shoot. I've had a great time with it. I've also run I had a nylon one with the red slide. I had to give it back in exchange for this, but I've run that and I had no problems with it either. All right, so don't stress about that. It's not a big deal. But the main things to keep in mind, it's a mechanical blaster. So what can happen is if you feed a bad gel in, for example, so maybe it's got a crack in it or it's a half gel or it's smushed or whatever, the extractor pin is not going to be able to pull the gel up, right? So you will get a misfeed if you do that. If you are careful about the gels, and I'm not saying being meticulous, I'm just saying as long as you know what you're doing with this, you're not going to have any misfeeds or anything like that. On that same note, it also means that anything that's oversized will cause issues for you as well, right? So a 7.1 millimeter in a barrel, you can't go and cram, a 7.6 millimeter gel down there for two reasons. One is obviously it may jam inside the actual barrel. There's actually a little kind of like housing sitting in here. So the gel from the magazine will go up and load into that chamber. So again, if it's too big, it's actually not going to fit in there. So you might get it falling out, getting crushed, all that sort of stuff as well. Kublai recommends gold pack and Milkies. Now, in my testing, there were a couple things I wanted to see. So the first one was, can someone pick up this blaster and with minimal kind of hands-on and mucking about and all that sort of stuff, can they run this blaster without issue? So I've tested gold Milkies. So I did I think it was a 3-hour grow. I drained the water. I didn't dry off the gels or anything like that, and chucked them straight in here and started firing. Now, I had absolutely zero issues, no problem whatsoever. That was actually quite surprising to me. The other thing as well though, with stuff like Milkies is out of your kind of higher quality gels, Milkies are a bit squishier, right? Like we've got all these hardened ones now. Milkies are a bit squishier. So there's two things. One is that when you release this spring, if you just snap it out, I'll see if I can, it doesn't, oh, there you go. So you'll see that if you release it hard, it actually drops a couple of gels. So the solution is just ease it off, that's fine. If you did that with Milkies, you'll probably get a few more squirt out, so try not to do that. But with Milkies, because they are squishier, you can actually get about 18 rounds in here, which is really cool. Comparatively, what I have in here at the moment is the AKA gels, they're really hard ones. I think I'm getting, at most with the AKAs, I get about 16 gels, which again is pretty good in my opinion. When you get a gas blowback sidearm here, it's really fun to use. So yeah, so keep that in mind. Now, the thing is with the hardened gels, so with AKAs and Armortex, which I've tested both of those, and I've tested glow gels, I have not got my hands on the Ultras yet. The main thing is you need to make sure that the gels that you're using are kind of 7.1 millimeters and below. So there's two ways you can do that. You could do an uncontrolled grow, so just grow it for a few hours and then try and filter them. What I did with the AKAs, I grew them in chilled, I wouldn't say cold, but chilled filtered water. And I did that for an hour and 15 minutes. In doing that, I ended up with gels that were between 6.8 and 7.1 millimeters. There might've been a few that were a tiny bit over. But in doing that, I've just been able to chuck them straight in here, and again, zero issues. First impressions, this thing is phenomenal. I've said it in person, I've said it online, I've said it plenty to different people, but this blaster is just so much fun to shoot. It should not be this fun, but it really is. And for clarity, again, like I was on the hype train. As soon as I heard about gas blowbacks, I was amazed, I was super excited. In fact, I'm pretty sure I was the first person to put a post up saying that it was classified and ready to come into the country. And that went nuts, and then it took forever. So in that time, videos came out showing some of the P1s failing or people having issues with them. And I think there's two parts of that. One is there was a lot of context missing. So sometimes people were in fact using the inappropriate gases and that sort of stuff. But that doesn't explain misfeeds and that sort of thing. But I haven't had a single issue. And there are some things to think about there. So yes, the product itself, right? So not just this metal slide one, but the P1 itself. It's gone through iterations. So they've worked through improving the product over time. So that's obviously helped resolve a lot of those misfeeds and that sort of stuff. So don't get me wrong, that's absolutely a thing. But what we do need to keep in mind is that something like a gas blowback, it doesn't matter if it's a P1, it may be a gas blowback from another company or another brand or whatever else. I guess the limitations in terms of what you can put in here is going to apply to everything. So you do need to keep an eye on the quality of the gels that you put in. You do need to maintain it. It's a mechanical toy. It still needs to have oil. It needs to be cleaned out. It needs to cycle properly. You're running gas, so you need to make sure that the right amount of gas is in there. A lot of the failures I've seen things where the slide locks back and the nozzle's kicked forward and there's gas leaking out everywhere, or the slide will just get stuck right about there, right? All those sorts of things, and I've experienced those, right? But when I've experienced them, it's been because the mag's not gassed, or that wasn't broken in, or it wasn't actually maintained correctly. There was no oil in there. Or in terms of misfeeds, it only happened, the only time I had misfeeds was when I used gels that were months old that weren't filtered, right? So the sizes were all over the place, and they were squishy or brittle or whatever else. As soon as you run with the recommendations, so gold Milkies that are relatively fresh, or in my case, I deliberately wanted to test out these hardened gels, so I tried out the AKAs. As long as the size is kept reasonable, absolutely no problem whatsoever. So it has thoroughly surprised me how good it is because of all those things that we've seen. Hands down, I would recommend this to anyone that wants to get into the gas blowbacks. I've not, other than, once I've discovered all that stuff, your gas, your gels, you're going to maintain it. No issues. No issues whatsoever. I can hand it to someone, they won't have issues with it. I can use it at training, I won't have issues. Use it as a primary in close quarters, and I won't have issues. So yeah, look, absolutely, I would recommend if you want to get one. That's my impression. They're a lot of fun. Normally, this is my chrono, right? So I've got a Acetec Lighter BT. It's got a chrono system in it and everything. I think I've broken it. I'm not sure. I'm trying to get it sorted. So I have some data. I'll put it up on screen that shows the performance that I was getting out of this. And I can't remember if I was running the AKA gels or the Gold Packer Milkies. But the point was, I was running that, getting some readings out of it, and the magazine at the time, I believe, was maybe like a quarter charged. It's hard to know. So what I've been doing over the last week or so is just figuring out exactly all the bits and pieces you need so that you can kind of get your blaster, go home and gas it up and go for it, right? So the main issue I was getting was that I was not gassing the magazine correctly. I was using the all-in-one, right? And one of these butane adapters. Using the all-in-one gas, I was getting readings of between 230 to 220 FPS, and you'll see those details on screen. Towards the end, those last couple of shots, the magazine started to gas out. You can normally tell when it's gassing out because the slide will start locking back and a few other things, right? So I was actually getting, that's what I was getting for the sidearm. I think honestly, that's pretty good using air duster gas. I've run it as a primary using 220 and it was fine. People calling the hits, that sort of stuff. And in terms of range, I'm easily hitting targets, 10, 15 meters away. The thing about it is, in terms of consistency, is the groupings are really tight. So even though, obviously you'd normally probably use it 5 to 10 meters in terms of engagement range or less, what I found interesting was that because the grouping was so tight is, yes, you can in fact lob accurately, to 15, 20 meters. Now, I'm not claiming that's the range, let me be clear. But just letting you know that that is something that is actually doable. And it's hard to know as to whether that's because, with the gels, because we're limited by the size or the variance as to, what you can kind of put in the blaster, it's obviously gonna help with the consistency. So it's hard to know whether it's because the blaster is designed really well, which it is, or if it's because of the gels, or, one or both. So we'll, I guess we'll never know really. But that is something to keep in mind. It is extremely consistent. If you're running the right gels and if you have the right amount of gas in there, absolutely no misfeeds. Zero misfeeds. I just kept firing and firing and firing, and there's footage of that. And I haven't had a single issue with it at all. And that was running, I think in that footage, I'm running AKAs and the gold packet Milkies. So I want to do some testing around, what do you need to do with Armitex, so whether it's white screens or the glows and that sort of thing. Because the manufacturer has kind of said, just run these, the gold packet Milkies. But in my opinion, I think everyone's going to want to run something different. So what do you need to do to run those things? If you want to run glows, what do you need to do? If you want to run Armitex, what do you need to do? If you want to run ultras, what do you need to do? So hopefully we'll get a list of that going. If it's not me, I'm sure someone else will do it anyway. Why get this blaster? Why get this version of the P1 instead of the nylon one, right? I mean, in Queensland anyway, I think most people try and get a bit of metal onto their blaster anyway in terms of durability, cool factor, weighing a bit more, that sort of thing. So firstly, look, it is phenomenally satisfying to shoot this thing, to play with this blaster with the metal slide on it. I mean, hopefully you can kind of hear the, how satisfying that sounds and feels and all that sort of stuff. With the metal upgraded top parts, the thing I got to say is it adds a hell of a lot of durability. Now on the nylon version, so if you don't kind of know how a Glock works, there is a little slide catch here, right? So you'll see that slide that pops up and catches the slide back. So that's how, when you're going to empty mag, that sort of thing, that gets racked back, which means you can, drop a mag in, let the slide forward, and you'll have a round ready to go. Now, the thing about that is on the nylon version, and I think this is seen in Lo Guido's videos as well, and other people have probably said similar things, is you have a metal magazine catch, and if you have a nylon slide and you keep doing this, over time, and I think it didn't even take very long on Guido's blaster, to be honest, it actually wears down the corner of the slide catch, or the little slot there. Now, for reference, the real steel Glock, that is a known thing. It happens over time, and it just needs work to be replaced or whatever else. And it will happen over time with this as well. However, again, like I've been running this thing, not only have I played it at games and training, I've been shooting it constantly all week just to make sure I haven't just gotten lucky with, not having misfeeds and that sort of stuff. Nothing's wearing down yet, right? It's a metal slide. Now, if you get a blaster, whether it's nylon or not, the easiest way to kind of prevent that from happening is, instead of using that slide release to drop the slide forward, you can just pull the slide back, right? And that will stop that from happening. Regardless, so that's the advantage, right? Like it does have a lot more durability to it. It feels a lot nicer. The outer barrel being threaded is honestly, that's a godsend. That's really good, because it means you can have a tracer unit on there. I'll try and get some footage of me running tracer gels. it feels crazy good. It's so much fun. But you can chuck that straight on there. You don't have to muck around. I'm sure someone's going to figure out some crazy hop up or something to put there. Or if you just want it to look cool and want to have a suppressor, it goes straight on, right? The inner barrel, now the 7.1mm diameter is the same. As far as I'm aware, because I pulled the nylon one apart, the inner barrel had a 7.1mm inner diameter. The only difference is that it has little, in the nylon or plastic version, it has little bumps inside the barrel. I think it's to stop gels falling out. I haven't had that issue with this blaster unless the gels were undersized. So something like 6.7, 6.8mm maybe, they start to roll out. But it's, you know, it's in there to stop the gels from falling out. But that said, it also means it's going to impact the dynamics of the gel coming out. So it affects consistency and accuracy and that sort of thing as well. So look, I mean, hands down, that on its own, so not even considering the magazine, that on its own to me is a really good selling point, the way it feels, everything. And I think most people will probably want to do a metal upgrade at some point. So, you know, do you want to spend $180 extra on doing the metal slide and all that stuff? And the barrel, it's like, I think it's like $230 depending on who you look at, you know, to go and do all that yourself, or get a blaster out of the box that already has those things for a little bit more than, you know, what the nylon one is. I mean, do the math yourself, right? But the other thing is this magazine is a very big deal. Now, I don't know entirely, you know, what magazines are going to land and where in terms of the nylon versions. All I know is it is guaranteed that this upgraded magazine will absolutely come with the upgraded P1. So that's really cool. So the I think there's two versions. There's this black version and there's a tan and gold version that like it comes out of the box like that. I don't remember seeing the threaded barrel on the gold Glock. So yeah, don't quote me on whether that's there or not. I just know that the black one has it. But this upgraded magazine is a very big deal because the reinforced spring means that the gels feed faster. The fact that the little slopey bit, it's kind of hard to see, slopey bit that helps feed the double stacked gels and prevents most misfeeds from what I can tell. And they've done a bit of work around making sure, or trying to limit the amount of gels that come popping out and that sort of stuff as well. The release or the springs in here have been upgraded to make sure that not too much gas gets vented. And again, as I've said, the internal seals of all this have been upgraded. So in theory, it should last longer. I don't have an older magazine to test. I do have pictures to show you the old versus the new one though, so I'll put those up on the screen. You'll see they've also moved the feeding port for the gels. They've actually moved it up, or well, depending which way you look at the magazine, further away from the top, so that you can actually load more gels in with ease. I think the old one had the port quite high, so it meant like you had very few gels to put in there. So that is a massive selling point. And I've already said, the magazine, in terms of gas blowbacks, this is more or less your gearbox, right? Like there's some stuff going on to feed gels at the top, but you need to make sure that gels feed flawlessly. You need to make sure that the right amount of gas can come out. You need to make sure that it holds the right amount of gas, you know, and you need to make sure that all these little bits are lined up perfectly so that when the extractor comes forward, you have a gel in the chamber. Like all this stuff is mechanical. Now, there are a couple of drawbacks with this. So the metal upper, or running a metal slide. So this particular setup, so it's got the metal slide, metal outer, and metal inner. Compared, if you do a side-by-side weighing of that versus the nylon P1, there's 60 grams difference. What it does mean is while we're using a lower power gas, so if you don't upgrade to propane, for example, and you want to keep running this, there's nothing wrong with that. What I have found is I think like if you've gassed up a mag, and then you've gone through like, you know, all the rounds in your magazine like 3 or 4 times, so you may be on the third or fourth, maybe 5th use of that one magazine, one charge. Due to the extra weight in the slide, the only thing that happens is when the magazine is empty, you won't get the slide to lock at the back. So everything feeds perfectly, right? It's still, what's essentially happening is it just means there's not enough pressure in the gas to fully push slide all the way back. So it comes back far enough to feed, but what'll happen, because I'm pretty sure that's about as far as it needs to go to feed. But you'll see here that the magazine catch is still too far back. The slide has to come to there in order for that to work. So that's the only catch. Honestly, that is the only catch I've found, and that hasn't stopped me from using it. The thing I've noticed with these is that if you are dry firing for whatever reason, you can actually distinctly hear the difference. You can almost immediately know when you've dry fired, and it's very easy to check an empty mag because you can just pull the slide back and you can look inside and you'll see whether it's empty or not. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're planning on running propane, you won't have an issue whatsoever because you'll have enough pressure to push the slide back. The other not really drawback, but thing to consider with metal, I don't know if this happens on the nylon one, but with metal, there's absolutely a break-in period. So you'll see on the top of mine, right? So actually, here we go. Look, I'll pull this apart for you. So on the top of mine, there's a little bit of wearing. And that's pretty normal, right? Like you got metal rubbing on metal. Again, happens with the real thing and to be expected with something that you're using regularly. So if I take this out, this is the outer barrel housing. So you'll see that this is that little kind of thing that sits in the ejector port. And what's happening is while the blaster is cycling, these kind of two parts rub against each other. So it doesn't cause any issues, right? So you'll see that I've got those rub marks. It does mean with maintenance, you definitely have to be on top of your maintenance, right? Like you've got to put oil and stuff inside your blaster and all that sort of stuff to make sure it's cycling properly. And you need to put some on top of this to make sure it cycles. But essentially what I'm trying to say is there is a break-in period. So you might get a little bit of extra friction on this for the first few magazines. And then once that's rubbed down, because that's going to be different on everyone's blaster, once that's rubbed down, it cycles flawlessly, right? No problems whatsoever. Should you get one? Look, if you have the money and if you're in the market for a sidearm, this is absolutely worth considering. Now, I've spoken to the distributor and his opinion is that you don't buy these things as a primary. When I was playing games on the weekend, I deliberately set out to prove him wrong and I played at Spec Ops using this as a primary. It's really fun. You absolutely could run this as a primary in close quarters environments. You definitely need to have more than one magazine or be extremely skilled at speed loading with this thing. You need more than one mag if you want to do it, but it's absolutely viable. I mean, 220 FPS, 230 FPS, you know, wherever that lands on duster gas, in close quarters is more than enough. You don't need to be shooting at 300 to be getting people in close quarters. And I'm sure you can talk to all the people that I shot and they will attest to the fact that they definitely feel the hits. I mean, especially with the AKA gels. But they definitely feel the hits, definitely call the hits. The only weird thing I've found, and this is not a shot at the players at all, but with blasters like this, and you may even find it with your normal setup, is because you're shooting semi and you're trying to keep an eye on ammo, what you might find is when you get a hit on someone, they'll be a little confused because they're not sure if they actually got hit by someone shooting them or if it's just a stray gel. So that's the only thing, but that's not a fault of the blaster, right? Now, however, if you're primarily a guy that or a girl that goes and plays out at larger fields like Donnybrook and sometimes Wacol, then the issue you might find is that you're going to be outranged by everyone, right? Like you can try and position yourself in close quarters or whatever else, but for the most part, you won't be able to run this as a primary in your large scale events or large scale fields purely because of range issues. If you want to do it for funsies, sure, but just don't be disappointed that you probably won't get the use out of it. In my experience, every single person that has shot this, right? So I've had this at events and given it to people to play around with. Every single person that I've given it to has either said, I want one, or they've said, they've gone from not wanting one at all to seriously considering getting one. Or the worst case scenario is, okay, so I'm convinced, but I'm going to wait until P2 or whatever other gas blowbacks come. And it's nothing against the P1. It's purely like, okay, I'm convinced that gas blowback is a thing, but I prefer the look of a 1911 or a USP or whatever other products are out there. It's not just me. It's everyone that's kind of handled it. Everyone else I've spoken to that's fired it, that's shot it. They were kind of on the fence. Similar to me. Like I was absolutely on the hype train. Don't get me wrong. I started to have some doubts seeing some of the problems that were emerging. But as soon as you work this out, so you get the right gas, so again, that gas, you get your oil, and you know exactly what gels you need to be running, it's happy days. That is the only hurdle, is just making sure you know all those things, and then you can pretty much go for gold. So the only other thing is I would recommend, once you have the product, once you have it in your hands, is pull this thing down. So it's pretty easy. You just strip this thing down, make sure you've got oil in the slides. We'll do a little breakdown video of how to maintain these. So you're just gonna put a bit of oil in there, make sure it's all good to go, cycle it a few times, dry fire it a bit. Don't do it too much, but just to make sure it all works. And honestly, you're good to go. That's it, done. So how do you get one? That's a really good question. Now I know that these things, so these black upgraded, metal P1s, they will be available to buy out of the box. So you'll get the little Kublai P1 box. This will come out of it. You'll get the magazine and everything as well. I just don't know where you're going to be able to buy it from yet. So there are, to kind of put, the doubts aside and all that sort of stuff, there are a number of P1s floating around in terms of stock and everything. They're in Australia. They absolutely are in Australia. We're just waiting on stuff like magazines, extra parts, that sort of stuff to arrive, because the last thing you want to do is you don't want to get a blaster that you can't use. So once all those parts are here, I'm pretty sure it's just going to be bonkers. I think there's going to be stuff everywhere, all sorts of upgrade parts, all sorts of configurations and everything that'll be available. So I don't know exactly who will be stocking these yet. I just know that this product will be available. And if we find out, then I will, I'll put in the description, or I'll put a post up or whatever, so hey, P1 that we reviewed, this metal one, you can buy it from wherever for however much. All right, so look, hopefully that was enough for you to kind of get your head around the P1. Now, I'm not sure how long this video has ended up as in total, because I've filmed a lot of stuff. It is our first gas blowback, right? Like, there is so much to cover, because it's a whole new mechanic. It's a whole new system of how you need to run a blaster, the things you need to do. And don't get me wrong, like, although this might seem like a lot, all the stuff that I've learned and figured out, and some of it, I've learned from others, it seems like a lot, but I've done all that so that you have like the blueprint. It'll be, use this gas, get this nozzle, get this oil, use those gels. Like, if you stick to that formula, you're gonna have a good time. It'll be fine. You don't need to worry about all the other stuff that's going on. And maintain your blaster. If you want to run Armitex, you want to run different gels, at most you're gonna have to just control grow them or size filter them. And to be honest, I think there's quite a few people out there doing that anyway, so that's not a big deal at all. But yeah, like, there's just so much to get into. But I think the main point is that the P1 is setting the path for something completely new. I, hands down, am behind this product. Haven't been paid. I'm not paid to endorse it. I just managed to get my hands on it, and and kind of do this independent review. I've run it at games. I've run it constantly at home because I can't stop shooting. It's so much fun. But to be honest, this is a good product. If you want a P1 or a gas blowback pistol and you absolutely can't wait for some other one that's going to come out, or you're convinced you're going to get multiple, buy this. And if you're going to buy a P1 with the intent of upgrading, buy this, because it's going to have the main parts that you need, and you're guaranteed to get this magazine, which is a really, really, really good thing. And look, knowing that this is a product that you can get out of the box with these things in it, I cannot justify buying a red slide or the tan nylon one. I can't justify buying that and then spending over $200 just to get the same stuff that's already available here. So and that doesn't even guarantee you get this magazine. So do your own research on that one. But if I'm definitely going to get another one, and I'm definitely going to buy more magazines, because I really, really, really would like to try run this as a primary in close quarters. I'm honestly, I'm set to disprove the theory that this cannot be run as a primary. I really think it can. But yeah, so look, that's the review. Hopefully, I'll cut some footage and stuff in here of the blaster firing and showing you this thing works. It doesn't misfeed. I'll show you some comparison shots and close-ups of the gels that I'm running, and it should give you an idea. Even these oils and everything, I'll get pictures, videos, whatever, and links to, so you guys can find all that. Hopefully a retailer will stock all this so that you can actually just walk in, buy your P1, buy your oil, buy your gas, whatever. So you can just go home, gas up, off you go. That would be ideal. Let's see if that happens. In the meantime, if you don't want to do that, or you don't want to pay retailer markup, follow these links, to these things. Although that's probably just straight from Bunnings anyway. And you should be able to obtain it whilst you wait for the product to launch. When is it going to launch? The last I heard, it should be the next couple of weeks. Obviously, things like this virus out of Wuhan is going to cause issues. So hopefully soon. I know that once, at the very least, once all of these land, all these magazines and whatever else is coming, that's going to go straight out to retailers, and everyone will be going nuts for it. Yeah, if you got any questions, let us know. We'll do some videos on gas blowback basics, because that way you can use that as a reference for this or whatever else you get your hands on, and also how to maintain this. If I can get my hands on, if anyone's got some suggestions, if I can get some more hands on different duster gases, We'll see if there's any FPS differences. I've seen some tests in the US and on our other sport showing that different duster gases, even though it's the same chemical, can be stored at different pressures, so we get different performance. And I think, and different gels. We'll find out, what gels will just run versus what gels do you need to control, grow, filter, and so on, and what kind of performance you get out of it. But like I've said, if you get one of these and you want to run AKAs, an hour and 15 minutes on a controlled grow, drain them, and you should get anywhere between 6.8 to 7.1 millimeters, and it runs fine. Gold packets, completely fine. Just keep them fresh, don't put old gels in, you'll get misfires. I've run glows, but they were old glows, so I definitely need to redo that and have a look. And the tracer unit's broken anyway, so I gotta figure that out. Yeah, cool. But yeah, hit us up, come play with it. If you see me on the field, come have a shoot. If you're kind of on the fence or whatever else, but just be careful. If you do come and shoot this thing, be prepared to put some money aside because you are going to want one.